If there's one dish that's sure to impress your friends and or family, it'd have to be the beef Wellington, or as we like to call it in French, beef en croûte, which starts with a fillet of beef just like this, that's wrapped in prosciutto and mushrooms, and then finally wrapped again in some puff pastry. Yes, there are a few steps in this recipe, but it's well worth the wait. And it's a real achievement at the end when you make something like this. So, fillet of beef, centre cut here, so it's all nice and even. It needs to be even because you want it to cook evenly in the oven later on. Salt, olive oil and pepper. And I've got a pan that's been heating up because I want it to be really hot. Now I'm going to seal this all over until it's golden brown. I don't want to cook it at this stage. I just want to get a nice crust on it so the juices don't run later on when we wrap it in the puff pastry. Now, while that's happening, we can get on to the mushroom duxelle. Mushroom duxelle is finely chopped mushroom. So I've got about 450 grams here of mushrooms, and I'm going to finely chop it because we're almost making a mushroom pate to spread over the prosciutto later. It is delicious. So I break it up, stalks and all here, and then we can place a lid on the food processor and blitz this until it's really finely chopped. Okay, now that that has been minced, I've got a pan ready to go here. I'm adding a little bit of butter and a little bit of olive oil in with the butter so it doesn't burn. And now we can start cooking off the mushrooms. Now, the mushrooms are going to take about 15 minutes because what's going to happen is I'm going to draw out as much of the liquid as possible. We don't want our pastry to be soggy, so you want this mushroom pate to be really dry but really flavoursome, and that's what's going to happen when we cook the mushrooms for a long time. So in with that, and into this I'm going to add a little bit of salt, some garlic and some French shallot. So all of this is fantastic flavours with the mushrooms there, and a good crack of pepper. Let's have a look at this beef. The beef smells so good. I could eat it already, but we will be patient. Now I'm going to turn it. Oh, and look at that colour. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to seal this over again on each side, 30 seconds on each side, remove it, and then allow it to cool completely before we get on to the next stage. Now that the beef is cooled and the mushrooms have cooled, I can add the mustard. I've also placed into the bowl some parsley and a little bit of thyme. And now I'm going to mix this all together. Perfect. I'm going to get some Glad cling wrap and I'm just going to line this board. Okay, now I'm going to line this with prosciutto. So this is going to give it a nice salty element. And I like to put my prosciutto horizontally. So I'll start at this end and we're going to overlap it. So we've got long vertical pieces just like this, and just squish it together so it sticks. The amount of prosciutto is dependent on how long your fillet of beef is. So I'm going to need about 4 long layers this way. After I've laid it onto the plastic, then I'm going to spread on this mushroom pate. Now that we have our 2 layers, the beef that's cooled down can go straight onto the mushrooms, and you want to start at the end closest to you because now we need to wrap very carefully. So now, just with this Glad cling wrap, we're just going to fold it over for the first layer and then just allow those layers to just fold over the beef. And now we're going to wrap this as tight as we can, squishing it together so it's really, really even. So now for the bonbon effect, I'm just going to twist one end and then I'll tie it up nice and tightly into a knot. Perfect. And now on the other side, we want to finally make it extra tight by just squeezing out any of the air bubbles and just rolling on your bench to get as tight as possible. And then again, tying that. And you can see at this stage it's a little bit soft, so I'm going to place it in the fridge for 1 hour before I can start wrapping it in the puff pastry. So now that this is chilled and I've got some chilled puff pastry here, we need to work fast because if this pastry gets too hot, it's really hard to wrap. So I'm just going to top and tail this fillet of beef and we'll very carefully unroll that. And now I'm going to place this beef straight onto the buttery puff pastry. Now I've just got a little egg wash here. Just egg that's been mixed nicely, and I'm going to just put a little bit of egg around the border of this puff pastry. And now we can start rolling. Now I always give myself lots of puff pastry for this because you can always trim it at the end. I like to tuck in the sides first, so we just bring that up, taking off the blue plastic there and folding that over the top so it covers the sides. And I'll do the other side. And I want this puff pastry to be about 3 millimeters thick, and you can just really force it over. First step done. Now with a little bit more of that egg wash, we're just going to brush all over. It's safer to put a bit more egg wash than not because you don't want it to unravel. So a little bit more. And then we're going to take this bottom corner and fold it over, taking that plastic off. And then folding one more time so the seam finishes at the base. So now I can cut that excess pastry and onto a baking tray, seam side down. And now I can just use a little bit more egg wash just to coat it because this is going to make it golden brown. Now you could place this in the oven straight away, but in order to get the ultimate crust, I like to place it back in the fridge for about 10 minutes. I like to start the cooking process with a really hot oven just so we get crispy pastry. So 200 degrees for 10 minutes, then bring the temperature down to about 140 and cook it for another 25 minutes. Now I like to serve my beef en croûte with some onion gravy, a must. So what I've done here is just slowly cook some onions in a little bit of butter until they're really soft and golden brown. Now to make this a thick gravy, I'm going to add a small amount of flour. And now for some red wine. And this is going to bubble away and reduce a little bit. Now I can add some Worcestershire sauce. And just to give it some more guts, I'm going to add a good spoonful of Dijon mustard in there. And then to make it extra saucy, we need to add 300 millilitres of beef stock. And then this is going to come to the boil, and then I'm going to turn it down and just allow it to bubble away until it thickens up. Ta-da! Pat on the back. I am so happy with that. See how perfectly pink that is? This is fillet of beef, so having it perfectly pink all the way through is exactly what you want. Now I'm really excited. So to serve this, I love to add my onions that are in a really delicious red wine sauce, a big spoonful of that, some wilted silver beet in the centre there. Perfect. And then I'm just going to get a gorgeous slice. I'm just going to lift that and carefully place it on the top there. That is such a pleasure to make. You know, this is a little bit technical, but have this under your belt. The world is your oyster, I like to say. In the old days, they would do this for a dinner party, but let's bring it back into vogue. Beef Wellington, or in French, beef en croûte. So yummy, especially with those delicious onions.